A 9-year-old girl gave a starving boy her lunch every day for 6 months. He looked her in the eyes and made her a promise that sounded impossible. 20 years later, he walked into a room worth billions, searching for one thing: her. But when he finally found her, what he discovered broke him in ways money could never fix. Chicago, 2003. Maria Hayes was 9 years old, and she was nobody special. At least, that's what she thought. Her family struggled to make rent every month. Her clothes came from thrift stores. Her lunch was usually a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in a paper towel. But Maria had something most people don't: a heart that saw people when everyone else looked away. Every day on her walk to school, she passed the same chain-link fence, and every day she saw him. A boy, maybe her age, maybe a little older. Dirty face, clothes that didn't fit, eyes that were too hungry, too desperate for a 9-year-old. He never asked her for anything. He just sat there on the other side of that fence, watching the world go by like he didn't belong in it. Most people walked past him. Maria stopped. "You hungry?" she asked one morning. The boy looked up at her like she'd just spoken a different language, like kindness was something he'd forgotten existed. He nodded. Maria reached into her backpack, pulled out her sandwich, and handed it through the fence. The boy stared at it for a second, then grabbed it like it might disappear. He ate it so fast she barely saw him chew. "What's your name?" Maria asked. "Blake," he said, mouth still full. "I'm Maria." Blake looked at her, really looked at her, like he was trying to memorize her face. "Why'd you give me that?" Maria shrugged. "You looked hungry." It wasn't complicated. It wasn't some big moral decision. She just saw someone who needed help, and she helped. That became their routine. Every single day for 6 months, Maria gave Blake her lunch. She never told her parents. She never made a big deal out of it. She just did it. And Blake started waiting for her every morning. Not just for the food, though God knows he needed it, but for her, for the only person in the world who saw him as a human being. One day after she handed him her sandwich, Blake grabbed her hand through the fence. "Maria," he said, his voice serious in that way kids get when they're trying to sound grown. "I'm going to be rich one day, I promise. And when I am, I'm going to come back and marry you." Maria laughed. She thought he was being silly. Okay, Blake, sure." But Blake didn't laugh. He pulled a red ribbon from his pocket, something he'd found somewhere, and tore it in half. He tied one half around Maria's wrist and kept the other. "So, you don't forget," he said. 2 weeks later, Blake was gone. The spot by the fence was empty. Maria waited every morning for a month, but he never came back. She kept the ribbon, though, even when it started to fray. Even when her mom asked her why she wore that raggedy old thing. She kept it because some part of her believed him. Some part of her believed that the starving boy who ate her lunches would actually keep his promise. What Maria didn't know was that Blake meant every single word, and what he would become in his hunt to find her would change both their lives forever. Hey, real quick, I want to know who's listening to this story with me right now. Drop a comment and tell me what country you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Is it morning? Late night? Are you listening while cooking dinner, or maybe during your commute? And how's the weather treating you today? Most importantly, how are things with your family? I hope everyone's doing okay. I love connecting with you all, and honestly, your comments make my day. Let me know you're here. Blake disappeared that summer like smoke. One day he was there by the fence, the next day gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just empty space where a boy used to sit. Maria kept showing up for weeks holding her sandwich, hoping, but the fence stayed empty. Years passed. Maria grew up in the same Chicago neighborhood, watching friends move away, watching families struggle, watching the city change while she stayed the same. She finished high school, started working at a community center, helped kids who reminded her of herself, kids who had nothing but still found ways to be kind. She dated a few guys, none of them stuck. Her mom kept asking when she'd settle down. Maria would just smile and change the subject. The red ribbons stayed on her wrist, faded now, almost colorless. Sometimes she'd catch herself touching it and wonder why she never took it off. Blake was just a memory, a childhood fantasy. Boys don't actually keep promises like that, but somewhere across the country, Blake remembered everything. He never forgot the taste of those sandwiches. Never forgot the way Maria looked at him like he mattered. Never forgot the promise he made. Blake's life after leaving Chicago was brutal. Foster homes, shelters, sleeping in bus stations. He learned fast that the world didn't care about starving kids. Nobody was going to hand him anything. So he took it. He lied about his age to get work, saved every penny, slept 4 hours a night, read business books he stole from libraries. By 16, he was hustling, flipping phones, reselling sneakers, anything that made money. By 20, he'd scraped together enough to start a real business. By 25, he was a millionaire. By 30, he was worth more than most people see in 10 lifetimes. But none of it felt real. The money, the success, the power. It was all just noise. Every deal he closed, every building he bought, every zero added to his account. He thought about her. Maria, the girl who fed him when no one else cared. The girl who tied that ribbon around his wrist like it meant something. He kept his half of the ribbon in a glass case in his penthouse. It was the only personal thing in the entire apartment. Everything else was cold, empty, professional. His business partner Richard used to joke about it. "You're obsessed with a girl you knew for 6 months when you were 9? That's insane, man." Blake never laughed. "You don't get it." Richard didn't. Nobody did. Because to Blake, Maria wasn't just a girl. She was the only proof he ever had that good people existed, that someone could give without expecting anything back, that kindness was real, and he made her a promise. Blake had built an empire on keeping his word. He closed billion-dollar deals on handshakes. His reputation was everything. But the one promise that mattered most, he still hadn't kept it. Blake hired his first private investigator when he turned 28. Cost him $50,000 up front. Find Maria Hayes, 9 years old in 2003. Lived in Chicago. That's all I have. The investigator laughed. "That's not much to go on." "Then earn your money and figure it out." 3 months later, the guy came back with a folder. Blake's hands shook as he opened it. 12 Maria Hayes in Chicago alone. None of them matched. The investigator found school records, social media profiles, addresses. Blake flew out personally to meet 3 of them. Wrong Maria. Wrong Maria. Wrong Maria. He hired another investigator, then another, then 5 at once. He threw money at the problem like it was a business deal he could win through sheer force. The files piled up on his desk. Dead ends. Maybes. Almost, but not quite. Each one felt like losing her all over again. Richard watched it happen from the inside. "Blake, this is destroying you. Maybe she doesn't want to be found. Maybe she moved on. She made a promise too. She was 9. Blake's jaw tightened. "I don't care." 5 years. 5 years of searching. Millions spent. Every lead turned cold. Every trail went nowhere. Maria Hayes was too common a name. Her family left no forwarding address after 2008. It was like she'd vanished. Blake stood in his penthouse one night, staring at the glass case. The ribbon inside was deteriorating despite the climate control. Fading, falling apart, just like his hope. He pressed his hand against the glass. "Where are you?" His phone buzzed. Another investigator, another dead end. Blake hurled his phone across the room. When it shattered against the wall. Richard found him there an hour later, sitting on the floor, head in his hands. "Blake, don't. You need to let this go." Blake looked up, eyes red. "She's out there. I know she is. then maybe she doesn't remember you. Those words hit harder than anything else. What if Maria had forgotten? What if the promise meant nothing to her? What if he'd spent 5 years chasing a ghost? Blake stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city lights below. I made her a promise, Richard, and I'm going to keep it, even if it killed him. The final report came on a Tuesday morning. Blake opened the email from his lead investigator, the one he'd paid $2 million over 3 years. Subject line, Final Report, Maria Hayes Search. His heart stopped. He clicked it open. Read the first line, then the second. Then he couldn't read anymore. We've exhausted all leads. Maria Hayes is too common a name. Family left no forwarding address after 2008. No social media presence under that name. No employment records match the age range. We've checked every database available. We've interviewed former neighbors. We've followed every possible trail. Conclusion: search is unviable. We recommend closing the case. Blake read it 3 times. Then he threw his laptop across the office. It shattered against the wall. Glass and metal everywhere. His assistant rushed in. "Mr. Blake, are you—" "Get out." She left. Blake sat there in his $10,000 chair in his corner office overlooking the city, and for the first time in 15 years he felt like that starving kid by the fence again. Powerless. Forgotten. Alone. He'd built a fortune that could buy anything. Private jets, yachts, islands, politicians. He could make or break companies with a phone call. He had more money than he could spend in 5 lifetimes. But he couldn't find one girl who fed him sandwiches. Richard came in later, saw the broken laptop, saw Blake's face. They couldn't find her. Blake didn't answer. "I'm sorry, man. I really am. Don't." "Blake, maybe it's time—" "Don't say it." Richard sat down across from him. "You've spent 5 years on this. Millions of dollars. You're killing yourself over a memory. She's not a memory. She's real. Then where is she?" Blake had no answer. Richard leaned forward. "Look, I get it. She was kind to you when no one else was. That matters. But you were 9 years old. She probably doesn't even remember you. And even if she does, she's moved on. She's built a life. You need to do the same. I made a promise. You were a kid." Blake's fist slammed on the desk. "I don't break my promises." The room went silent. Richard stood up. "Then you're going to die alone, chasing a ghost." He left. Blake sat there until the sun went down, until the city lights came on, until his office was dark except for the glow from the buildings outside. He walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the glass. "Where are you, Maria?" Somewhere out there, in some city, some neighborhood, some life he couldn't reach. Maria Hayes existed. He knew it. He felt it. But knowing wasn't enough. For the first time since he was 9 years old, Blake felt like giving up. Blake's penthouse was 60 floors above the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Marble floors. Furniture that cost more than most people's cars. And it felt like a tomb. No pictures on the walls, no personal items except one, the glass case in the center of his living room containing half a red ribbon. He stood in front of it every morning, touched the glass, said the same thing. "I'm still looking." The ribbon was dying. Even with the preservation setup, climate control, UV filters, everything money could buy, the fabric was deteriorating. Threads coming loose. Color almost completely gone. Just like his hope, Blake's daily routine was mechanical. Wake up, stare at the ribbon, shower, suit, office, meetings, deals, money, home, stare at the ribbon, sleep. He didn't date, didn't have friends. Richard was the closest thing, and even that was mostly business. His employees called him Mr. Blake. Never just Blake. He preferred it that way. Distance was easier. One night he sat on his couch with a glass of whiskey, staring at the case. His phone rang. Richard. Yeah. There's a community meeting next week. Chicago. South Side. Neighborhood Development Project. Blake's heart jumped. Why are you telling me this? Because one of my guys heard something. There's a woman involved, community organizer, helps poor families, name's Maria. Blake stood up so fast he almost dropped his phone. Last name? Didn't get it. But Blake, listen, it's probably not her. Don't get your hopes up. Too late. Blake was already pulling up flights to Chicago. Send me everything you have. Blake. Everything. Now. He hung up. For the first time in 5 years, Blake felt something other than emptiness. He looked at the ribbon in its case. I'm coming. Hey, listen. I need something from you right now. If this story is hitting you in any way, if you're feeling what Blake's feeling, if you've ever made a promise you couldn't keep, if you've ever lost someone you needed to find, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Not for me, for you. Because what happens next is going to wreck you in the best way possible, and you don't want to miss a single second. Also, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had someone in your life who showed you kindness when you had nothing? Someone you never forgot? I want to hear your story. Let's build this community together. Blake couldn't sleep on the flight to Chicago. His mind ran through 1,000 scenarios. What if it was her? What if it wasn't? What if she didn't remember him? What if she did and didn't care? He landed at O'Hare at 6 in the morning. I didn't even check into a hotel. Went straight to the address Richard sent him. The community center was in the same neighborhood where he used to sleep on benches. Nothing had changed. Same cracked sidewalks, same boarded-up buildings, same feeling of being forgotten by the rest of the world. Blake pulled up in a black SUV that cost more than most houses on this block. People stared. Richard met him outside. You look terrible. I don't care. Is she here? The meeting's tonight, 7 p.m. Blake, I need you to prepare yourself. This might not be. I know. But he didn't know. He couldn't prepare. How do you prepare to see the only person who ever mattered? They spent the day doing recon. Richard showed him the files. Maria Hayes, 31 years old, community organizer, ran programs for at-risk kids. I lived 3 blocks from where Blake used to beg for food. No photo. Blake's hands shook, holding the folder. This could be her. Or it could be another Maria Hayes. There's dozens in Chicago alone. Blake wasn't listening. He was already counting down the hours. 6 p.m. 5 hours. 7 p.m. 4 hours. The waiting was torture. At 6:30, they headed to the community center. Blake wore a suit that cost $15,000. He looked ridiculous in this neighborhood, and he knew it. Richard put a hand on his shoulder. Whatever happens in there, keep it together. Blake nodded, but his heart was hammering so hard he could barely breathe. They walked into the building. The meeting room was packed. 50, maybe 60 people, families, kids, community leaders. Blake scanned every face, and then he saw her. She was standing near the front talking to an older woman, brown skin, natural hair pulled back, simple clothes, no makeup, and on her left wrist, a faded piece of red ribbon. Blake's world stopped. 20 years collapsed into a single moment. The fence, the sandwiches, the promise, everything. Richard saw his face. Blake, you okay? Blake couldn't speak. Eyes couldn't move. Couldn't do anything but stare. It was her. Maria Hayes, the girl who saved his life. The girl he'd spent 5 years and millions of dollars trying to find. The girl he'd built an empire for. She was right there. I need to... Blake started walking toward her before he even finished the sentence. Richard grabbed his arm. Wait. Think about this. You can't just... Blake pulled away and kept walking. His legs felt weak. His hands were shaking. He'd closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but right now he felt like that 9-year-old boy again. Terrified, hopeful, desperate. Maria was still talking to the older woman, laughing at something. She had the same smile, the same warmth in her eyes. Blake was 10 feet away, then 5. Then Maria turned and looked directly at him. Their eyes met, and everything else disappeared. Maria's smile faded, her face went blank, then confused, then shocked. She knew. Blake opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Maria stared at him, at his expensive suit, at his face, trying to piece together who this man was and why he looked so familiar. Then her eyes dropped to his wrist. Blake hadn't even realized he'd pushed up his sleeve, but there it was, the other half of the red ribbon, preserved and faded, tied exactly where she'd put it 20 years ago. Maria's hand went to her own wrist, to the matching piece of fabric she'd worn for 2 decades. Her eyes went wide. "Blake," he nodded. The room was full of people, but neither of them saw anyone else. "You came back," Maria whispered. Blake's voice cracked. "I promised." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The community center buzzed with conversation around them, but Blake and Maria existed in a bubble where time didn't work right. Maria's hand was still on her wrist, fingers touching the red ribbon like she needed to confirm it was real, that he was real. She started, then stopped. "How did you? I've been looking for you for 5 years." Maria's eyes widened. 5 years. Blake nodded. He wanted to say more, wanted to explain everything, but the words stuck in his throat. He'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head, and now that it was happening, he had no idea what to do. Maria looked him up and down. The suit, the watch, the way he carried himself. This wasn't the starving kid from the fence. This was someone else entirely. "You're really him," she said, more to herself than to Blake. "And I'm really him. You got rich. I told you I would." A strange expression crossed Maria's face. Not quite anger, not quite sadness. Something in between. "That was 20 years ago, Blake." "I know. We were children." "I know. And you actually—" She shook her head, like she couldn't believe what she was saying. "You actually kept looking for me? All this time?" "Every single day." Maria took a step back. The moment shifted. The fairy tale cracked. "Why?" The question hit Blake like a punch. "What do you mean, why?" "I mean, why, Blake? Why would you spend 5 years looking for someone you knew for 6 months when you were 9? That doesn't make sense." Blake felt Richard's presence behind him but didn't turn around. "You saved my life. I gave you sandwiches. You gave me hope." Maria's jaw tightened. Now Blake saw something in her eyes he hadn't expected. Not joy, not relief, anger. "So what happens now?" Maria asked, her voice harder. "You found me. You kept your promise. What do you want? A medal? A thank you?" Blake felt the ground shifting under him. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. "Maria, You show up here in a suit that probably costs more than my rent after 20 years, and you think we're just going to pick up where we left off? Like time didn't pass? Like I didn't live a whole life without you?" Blake had no answer. Maria looked at him, really looked at him, and Blake saw something that terrified him more than failure ever could. She wasn't the same girl, and maybe he wasn't the same boy. The silence between them stretched too long. People were starting to notice. An older man walked over, his eyes moving between Blake and Maria. "Everything okay here, Maria?" Maria didn't look away from Blake. "Yeah, Mr. Johnson, everything's fine." It wasn't fine. Blake could feel it. Everything he'd imagined, everything he'd hoped for was crumbling. "Can we talk?" Blake asked. "Somewhere private?" Maria crossed her arms. "We're talking now." "Maria, please." She stared at him for another moment, then sighed. "Fine. 5 minutes." She led him outside to a small courtyard behind the building. Richard started to follow, but Blake waved him off. When they were alone, Maria turned to face him. Talk. Blake didn't know where to start. I looked everywhere for you. I hired investigators. I spent millions. Maria laughed, but there was no humor in it. You spent millions looking for a girl who gave you lunch. Do you hear how crazy that sounds? You don't understand. No, you don't understand. Maria's voice rose. I was 9 years old, Blake. I gave you food because you looked hungry. That's it. I didn't expect anything back. I didn't need you to become a billionaire and hunt me down 20 years later. I made you a promise. We were kids. Blake felt his chest tightening. That promise was the only thing that kept me going. Every night I slept in shelters, every time I got beat up, every time I wanted to quit. I thought about you, about coming back, about keeping my word. Maria's expression softened slightly, but the anger was still there. That's not fair. What's not fair? Putting that on me. Making me the reason for everything you did. I didn't ask for that. Blake felt like he'd been slapped. I thought you'd be happy. Happy? Maria shook her head. Blake, I'm 31 years old. I have a job. I have responsibilities. I have a life here helping people who actually need me, and you show up like some prince in a fairy tale expecting me to what? Drop everything? Fall into your arms? That's not what Then what do you want? Blake opened his mouth, then closed it. What did he want? He'd been so focused on finding her, he never thought about what came after. I wanted to keep my promise, he said quietly. I wanted to make you my wife. Maria stared at him. You don't even know me. The words hit harder than any investigator's report. She was right. He knew the 9-year-old girl who gave him sandwiches. He didn't know this woman standing in front of him, and she didn't know him either. You're right, Blake said finally. I don't know you, but I want to. Maria looked down at the ribbon on her wrist. I kept this for 20 years. You know why? Blake waited. Because it reminded me that good things exist, that kindness matters, that somewhere out there, maybe that starving kid made something of himself. She looked up at him. But I didn't keep it so you could find me. I kept it for me. Blake felt something breaking inside him. Maria wasn't done. You want to know what my life's been like? I grew up in the same neighborhood you left, same poverty, same struggle. I watched friends get shot. I watched families lose everything. I could have left, could have gone somewhere better, but I stayed. Why? Because somebody needed to. Because kids like us, like you were, they need people who actually stick around, not people who disappear and show up 20 years later with money. Blake felt the accusation behind her words. I was a kid. I didn't have a choice. I know. I'm not blaming you for leaving. I'm just saying, we lived different lives, Blake. You built an empire. I built a community. We're not the same people anymore. Does that mean the promise doesn't matter? Maria touched her ribbon again. It means the promise was made by children who didn't know what promises cost. Blake's phone buzzed in his pocket. Richard, probably. He ignored it. What if I stayed? Blake asked. What if I didn't just show up and leave? What if I actually got to know you? Maria studied his face. Why would you do that? Because I didn't spend 5 years looking for you just to give up now. That's not an answer. Blake stepped closer. Because when I was 9 years old, starving and invisible, you saw me. You didn't have to. You just did. And that meant everything. It still means everything. Maria's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Pretty words. They're true. Maybe. But truth doesn't change the fact that you're a stranger, Blake. A rich stranger with a childhood memory. Then let me be more than that. Maria looked away, toward the community center. Through the window, Blake could see people laughing, talking, living their lives. "I need to get back," Maria said. "Can I see you again?" She hesitated. "I don't know." "Please," Maria turned back to him. "You really want to know me? The real me? Not the girl you remember?" "Yes." "Then prove it. Don't show up here throwing money around. Don't try to fix everything with your wealth. Just be a person. A normal person. Can you do that?" Blake thought about his penthouse, his private jet, the life he'd built where money solved everything. "I can try." Maria almost smiled. "That's all I'm asking." She walked back toward the building, then stopped. "Blake?" "Yeah? I'm glad you're not starving anymore." Then she was gone. Blake stood there in the courtyard, feeling more lost than he'd felt in years. Richard appeared beside him. "How'd it go?" Blake touched the ribbon on his wrist. "I don't know." "Okay, I need to pause here for a second because this is real life, not fairy tales. How many of you have ever wanted something so bad, worked so hard for it, and when you finally got it, it wasn't what you expected? Drop a comment right now. Tell me about a time you chased something, a person, a dream, a goal, and reality hit different than the fantasy. Maybe you're Team Blake, thinking he deserves a chance. Maybe you're Team Maria, thinking she has every right to protect herself. Maybe you're somewhere in between. I want to hear it. And hit subscribe, because what happens next is going to change everything you think you know about this story. Blake didn't leave Chicago. He checked into a hotel, not the penthouse suite, just a regular room. Richard thought he was losing his mind. "You're staying? For what?" "She basically told you to leave her alone." "She told me to prove I'm more than just money." Richard shook his head. "Blake, you run a billion-dollar empire. You can't just abandon everything for a woman who doesn't even want you here." "Watch me." The next morning, Blake showed up at the community center wearing jeans and a t-shirt. No suit, no watch, nothing that screamed money. Maria was inside, setting up chairs for a youth program. She saw him walk in and froze. "What are you doing here?" "You told me to prove I'm more than money, so here I am." "Blake, put me to work, whatever you need." Maria stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're serious?" "Completely." She wanted to say no. Blake could see it on her face, but something stopped her. Maybe curiosity, maybe something else. "Fine. Grab those tables and help me set them up." Blake spent the next 4 hours moving furniture, organizing supplies, and helping Maria prepare for the afternoon's program. His back hurt. His hands got dirty. He wasn't used to physical labor anymore. He loved every second of it. Kids started arriving around 3. 12 of them, ages 8 to 14. They looked at Blake suspiciously. "Who's the new guy?" one of them asked Maria. "This is Blake. He's helping out today." A girl around 10 looked him up and down. "You don't look like you're from here." Blake smiled. "I used to be. Long time ago." The kids weren't impressed, but as the afternoon went on, Blake found himself relaxing, playing basketball with them, helping with homework, listening to their stories. One boy reminded him of himself. Quiet, watchful, hungry eyes. "You okay?" Blake asked him. The boy shrugged. "Yeah. You sure? You look like you got something on your mind." "My mom lost her job. We might get evicted." Blake's chest tightened. He wanted to pull out his checkbook right then and fix it, but he caught Maria watching him from across the room. Instead, he sat down next to the boy. "That's tough, man. And I've been there." "Really?" "Really. Worse than you'd believe." They talked for 20 minutes. Blake didn't offer money, didn't make promises, just listened. When the program ended and the kids left, Maria walked over to him. "That was good. What you did with Marcus?" "The kid with the eviction?" Maria nodded. "Most people would have tried to throw money at it. I wanted to. But you didn't. Blake met her eyes. You told me not to. Maria studied him for a long moment. Why are you really here, Blake? And don't give me the promise line again. Blake thought about it. Really thought about it. Because for 20 years I've been chasing something. I thought it was you. But maybe it was this. This? Feeling like I matter for something other than my bank account. Maria's expression softened. You do matter. Odd, you always did. Then let me stay. Let me help. She hesitated. This isn't a game. These kids need consistency. If you're gonna be here, you gotta actually be here, not just when it's convenient. I will be. For how long? A week? A month? Until you get bored? As long as it takes. Maria looked at him hard, searching for the lie. We'll see. 2 weeks passed. Blake showed up every single day, morning to evening. No suit, no bodyguards, just him. Richard called constantly. You have meetings, you have deals closing. You can't just ignore your company. Handle it. Blake, this is insane. Then I'm insane. Blake worked alongside Maria, painted walls, fixed broken chairs, tutored kids in math. He learned their names, their stories, their dreams. And slowly, Maria started to soften. Not all at once, not dramatically, just little moments. A smile when he made a kid laugh, a thank you when he stayed late to clean up, a conversation that lasted longer than necessary. One evening, after everyone left, they sat on the steps outside the center. You're actually serious about this, Maria said. I told you I was. I didn't believe you. Blake looked at her. Do you believe me now? Maria touched the ribbon on her wrist, the one she'd worn for 20 years. I'm starting to. They sat in silence for a moment. Comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need filling. Can I ask you something? Blake said. Sure. Why'd you keep the ribbon? Maria smiled. You really want to know? Yeah. Because it reminded me that people can surprise you. That a hungry kid can promise something impossible and actually mean it. She looked at him. Even if it takes 20 years. Blake felt something shift between them. Not love. Not yet. But possibility. Maria? Yeah? I know I don't know you. Not really. But I'd like to. Maria held his gaze. You're doing better than I expected. Is that a compliment? Don't push it. Blake laughed, actually laughed. For the first time in years, he felt light. Maria stood up. Same time tomorrow? I'll be here. She walked away, then turned back. Blake? Yeah? Thank you. For showing up. Blake watched her go, and for the first time since he found her, he felt like maybe the promise wasn't impossible after all. Richard was right about one thing, though. Blake couldn't ignore his company forever. Reality was coming. And when it did, he'd have to choose. 3 weeks in, Richard showed up at the community center unannounced. Blake was in the middle of helping a teenager with a college application essay when he walked through the door. Richard looked around at the peeling paint, the worn floors, the donated furniture. His face said everything. We need to talk. Now. Blake excused himself and followed Richard outside. What's so urgent? The Tokyo deal. It's falling apart. They want you there in person or they're walking. Send someone else. Blake, this is a $400 million contract. You can't just... I said send someone else. Richard's jaw tightened. What's happening to you? A month ago you were obsessed with building the company. Now you're playing teacher in a rundown community center? I'm not playing anything. Really? Because from where I'm standing, you're throwing everything away for a woman who barely tolerates you. Blake's fists clenched. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? You found her, Blake. You kept your promise. Mission accomplished. Now it's time to get back to reality. This is reality. Richard laughed bitterly. No. Reality is the empire you built. Reality is the people depending on you. Reality is that you can't fix your childhood by staying here. The words hit Blake like a slap. Get out. Blake, I said get out. Richard stared at him for a long moment. You're making a mistake. Then it's my mistake to make. Richard left. Blake stood there, hands shaking, not from anger, from fear, because part of him knew Richard was right. Maria came outside. Everything okay? Blake forced a smile. Yeah, just business stuff. But Maria saw through it. She always did. You don't have to stay here, you know. If you have other things, there's nothing more important than this. Maria looked at him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Why? What do you mean? I mean, why, Blake? You keep saying the promise matters. You keep showing up. But I need to understand. Are you here for me? Or are you here because you're running from something? The question caught Blake off guard. I'm not running, aren't you? You built this massive company. You have this whole life, and you just dropped it to hang out at a community center. That doesn't sound like someone who's found what they want. That sounds like someone who's avoiding what they have. Blake had no answer, because deep down, he wondered the same thing. Was he here because Maria mattered, or because everything else felt empty? Maria stepped closer. I need you to be honest with me. And with yourself. What do you actually want? Blake looked at her, at the woman she'd become. Strong, independent, real, not the fantasy he'd been chasing. I want to matter, he said quietly. Not because of my money. Not because of what I can buy. I want to matter because of who I am. Maria's expression softened. Blake, you already do. Do I? Because all I've been my whole life is hungry. Hungry for food, then hungry for success, then hungry to find you. I don't know how to just be. Then maybe that's what you need to learn. Blake felt something crack inside him. 20 years of pressure, 20 years of chasing, all of it coming to the surface. I'm scared, he admitted. Of what? That without the chase, I'm nothing. Maria took his hand, the first time she'd touched him since he arrived. You're not nothing, Blake. You never were. That night, Blake couldn't sleep. Maria's words kept echoing in his head. He sat in his hotel room staring at his phone. 47 missed calls. 63 unread emails. His company was hemorrhaging money while he played volunteer. Richard was right. He couldn't keep ignoring reality, but every time he thought about leaving, he remembered Marcus, the quiet kid with the eviction notice. Blake had been that kid, and back then, nobody stayed. His phone rang. Richard again. Blake answered. What? The board called an emergency meeting. They're threatening to remove you as CEO if you don't come back. Blake's stomach dropped. They can't do that. They can and they will. You own 51%, but if they can prove you're mentally unfit to lead, they have options. And disappearing for a month to volunteer looks real bad, Blake. I'm not disappearing. You're what? Finding yourself? This isn't a movie. This is your life. Everything you built. Are you really going to throw it away? Blake thought about the penthouse, the private jet, the power, the respect. Everything he'd worked for since he was 9 years old. Then he thought about yesterday. Marcus hugging him after Blake helped him finish his homework. The way Maria smiled when he made the kids laugh. The feeling of actually mattering. I don't know, Blake said honestly. You don't know? Blake, what's gotten into you? I just need time to think. You don't have time. The meeting's in 3 days. Either you're there or you lose everything. Richard hung up. Blake sat there in the dark, feeling the weight of the choice pressing down on him. Go back and keep his empire. Stay and keep his promise. He couldn't do both. The next morning, he showed up at the center like nothing was wrong. Maria took one look at his face and knew. What happened? Nothing. Blake, he sighed. My company. They want me back or I lose everything. Maria's face fell. When? 3 days. They stood there in silence, all the progress they'd made, all the connection they'd built, hanging in the balance. You should go, Maria said quietly. What? You should go back. You built that company. You can't just abandon it. But the promise was made by kids, Blake. We're adults now. Adults make hard choices. Blake felt his world tilting. So that's it? I just leave? Maria's eyes glistened. You were always going to leave. We both knew that. I don't want to. But you have to. She touched his face. And that's okay. You came back. You kept your promise. That's more than most people ever do. Blake grabbed her hand. Come with me. What? Come to New York. Leave all this. I'll take care of everything. Huh. You'll never have to worry about money again. Maria pulled her hand away. And do what, Blake? Be your trophy? Your proof that poor kids can make it? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Blake didn't have an answer. Listen, I'm going to be real with you for a second. Life doesn't give us easy choices. It gives us impossible ones. Blake's standing at a crossroads and, honestly, I don't even know what I'd do. Drop a comment right now. What would you choose? The empire you built from nothing, or the person who saved you when you had nothing? And don't forget to subscribe because the next chapter is going to destroy you in ways you're not ready for. I promise you that. Blake spent the next 2 days in agony. Every morning he showed up at the center. Every night he stared at his phone, watching his empire crumble in real time. Stock prices dropping, partners pulling out, employees panicking. Richard sent him updates every hour like countdown timers to his own destruction. 12 hours until the board meeting. 6 hours until the board meeting. Blake, answer your damn phone. But Blake kept showing up, kept helping Marcus with homework, kept fixing broken chairs, kept pretending his world wasn't burning down. Maria watched him fall apart and said nothing. On the final day, Blake sat with Marcus after the program ended. The kid was working on a math problem, tongue stuck out in concentration. Mr. Blake? Yeah, Marcus. Are you leaving? Blake's throat tightened. What makes you say that? You look sad, like my dad looked before he left. Blake didn't know what to say to that. Marcus put down his pencil. It's okay if you gotta go. I get it. Adults got stuff to do. Marcus, just promise you won't forget about us, okay? Blake felt something break inside him. This kid who reminded him so much of himself, who trusted him, who needed him. I promise, Blake whispered. Marcus smiled and went back to his math. Maria appeared in the doorway. Can we talk? They walked to the courtyard, the same spot where everything changed a month ago. You have to go, Maria said. Tonight. I know. So why are you still here? Blake looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman who'd saved him twice. Once when he was starving. Once when he was lost. Because I finally found what I was looking for. Blake. Not you. Not the promise. This. He gestured to the center. Mattering for the right reasons. Being someone worth being. Maria's eyes filled with tears. You can matter there too. In New York. Running your company. Making decisions that affect thousands of people. It's not the same. Maybe not. But it's real. It's your life, Blake. The life you built. You can't just throw it away. What if I don't want that life anymore? Then you're a coward. The words hit like a slap. Blake stepped back. What? You heard me. If you walk away from everything you built because it's hard, because it's empty, because it doesn't feel good enough, that's not brave, that's running away. I'm not running. Yes, you are. You're running from the fact that you can't fix your childhood by staying here. You're running from the fact that money and success didn't heal you like you thought they would. So now, you want to pretend it doesn't matter. That you can just be simple and everything will be okay. Blake felt anger rising. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You wanted me to be the answer to all your problems. When I wasn't, you decided this place would be. But Blake, you're the only one who can fix what's broken inside you. Not me. Not this center. You. So what am I supposed to do? Maria grabbed his shoulders. Go back. Face your company. Face your life. And figure out who Blake actually is when he's not chasing something. And what about us? Maria smiled sadly. There is no us, Blake. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But you need to figure yourself out first. Blake wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but he couldn't, because she was right. He'd spent 20 years chasing, first food, then success, then Maria. He'd never stopped long enough to ask what he actually wanted. I don't want to lose you again, Blake said. Then don't. But don't stay here because you're scared of leaving. Stay because it's where you're supposed to be. And right now, you're supposed to be in New York. Blake felt tears on his face. Didn't even realize he was crying. Maria wiped them away. Go be great, Blake. Really great. Not rich great. Not powerful great. Good great. How? You'll figure it out. Blake flew back to New York that night. Richard met him at the airport looking like he hadn't slept in days. You came. I came. The meeting's in 4 hours. I need to prep you on everything that's... Richard, stop. Richard stopped. Blake looked at his business partner, his only friend, the man who'd been warning him for months. I'm sorry. For what? For everything. For disappearing. For making you pick up my mess. For not listening. Richard's face softened. You're here now. That's what matters. They went to Blake's penthouse, the place he hadn't seen in a month. It looked exactly the same. Cold, empty, perfect. Blake walked to the glass case in the middle of the room. The red ribbon was still there, faded and dying. He opened the case and took it out, held it in his hands. What are you doing? Richard asked. Blake stared at the fabric, at the symbol of everything he'd chased, everything he'd sacrificed. Then he carefully folded it and put it in his pocket. Not in a case. Not on display. Just with him. Getting ready, Blake said. The board meeting was brutal. 12 executives staring him down like vultures. The chairman didn't waste time. Mr. Blake, your month-long absence has cost this company $200 million. Contracts lost. Partners walking. Employees questioning leadership. Explain yourself. Blake stood, every eye in the room on him. I can't. Silence. I can't explain it in a way that makes business sense. I can't justify it with numbers or projections. I went back to where I came from because I forgot who I was. And I needed to remember. That's not good enough, the chairman said. I know. But it's the truth. Another board member spoke up. So, what happens now? You expect us to just trust you after you abandoned the company? Blake looked around the room, at the wealth, the power, the success he'd built. No, he said. I expect you to hold me accountable. I messed up. I made a choice that hurt the company, and I'm ready to face the consequences. The chairman leaned forward. And if we vote to remove you? Blake thought about Maria, about Marcus, about the community center with its broken chairs and donated supplies. Then I'll accept it. But I'm asking you for a second chance. Not because I deserve it, because I know who I am now. And I can lead this company better than I ever have. The room was silent. How? Someone asked. Blake pulled the red ribbon from his pocket, placed it on the table. This is why I built this company. Not for money, not for power, because I wanted to prove I mattered, that I wasn't just some starving kid nobody cared about. He looked around the room. But I was wrong. I've always mattered. And so does everyone we serve. Every employee, every client, every person we impact. That's what I forgot. That's what I'm going to remember. More silence, Then the chairman spoke. "We'll vote in the morning." Blake nodded and left. Outside, Richard caught up with him. That was either brilliant or career suicide. Blake smiled. Probably both. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Proud of you. M." Blake stared at it. Maria had been watching somehow, keeping track. He typed back, "Thank you for everything." 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally. "Come back when you're ready. I, the real you." Blake put his phone away and looked out at the New York skyline. His empire, his prison, his second chance. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Didn't know if the board would keep him or fire him. But for the first time in 20 years, Blake wasn't hungry anymore. He was just ready. The board voted at 8 a.m. Blake sat in his penthouse staring at his phone, waiting for the call that would decide his fate. Richard paced the floor. "They're taking too long. That's either really good or really bad." Blake didn't respond. He was thinking about Marcus, about whether the kid finished his math homework, about whether Maria found someone else to fix the broken chairs. His phone rang. Blake's hand shook as he answered. "Yeah?" The chairman's voice came through. The vote was 7-5. Blake closed his eyes. 7-5 meant he lost. You needed 8 votes to stay. "However," the chairman continued, "I'm changing my vote. 8-4. You keep your position. But Blake, this is your last chance. One more stunt like this and you're done." Blake couldn't speak. "Do you understand?" "Yeah, I understand. Thank you." The chairman hung up. Richard let out a breath he'd been holding. "You did it." Blake nodded, but he didn't feel victorious. He felt tired. Bone tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. "Now what?" Richard asked. "Good question." Blake had his company back, his empire secured, everything he'd worked for preserved. So why did it feel like he'd lost something bigger? Blake stood up, walked to the window, looked down at the city 60 floors below. All those people living their lives, struggling, surviving, mattering in ways that had nothing to do with money. "I need to change how we do things," Blake said. "What do you mean?" "The company. We're focused on profits, on growth, on winning. But what's the point if we're not actually helping people?" Richard looked concerned. "Blake, you can't turn $1 billion company into a charity." "I'm not talking about charity. I'm talking about purpose. We make software, right? We build systems. What if we built systems that actually improved lives instead of just making money?" "That's idealistic." "Maybe. But I don't want to build something that only exists to make me richer. I want it to mean something." Richard sat down. "She really got to you, didn't she?" "Who?" "Maria. This whole thing, it changed you." Blake thought about that. "No, she didn't change me. She reminded me who I was before I forgot. And who's that? A kid who survived because someone cared. Maybe it's time I paid that forward." Over the next 3 weeks, Blake restructured everything. He launched programs for low-income communities, created scholarships, redirected company resources toward projects that actually helped people instead of just generating profit. The board hated it. The shareholders complained. Richard thought he'd lost his mind, but Blake didn't care. For the first time since building his empire, he felt like he was building something that mattered. He worked 16-hour days, barely slept, threw himself into the work with the same obsession he'd used to find Maria. But this time it felt different. This time it felt right. Late one night, alone in his office, Blake's phone buzzed. A text from Maria. "I saw the news. You're doing good things." Blake smiled, typed back, "Learned from the best. Don't stay away too long. Marcus asks about you every day." Blake's chest tightened. "Tell him I'll be back soon." "Will you, though?" Blake stared at that question. The honest answer? He didn't know. He was drowning in work. drowning in responsibility. The company needed him. Thousands of employees depended on him. But so did Marcus. So did Maria. So did that broken community center with its peeling paint and donated chairs. He couldn't be in both places. Couldn't be both versions of himself. "I don't know how to do this," Blake typed. Maria's response came fast. "Nobody does. You just figure it out as you go." "What if I fail?" "Then you fail. But at least you tried." Blake put his phone down, looked around his empty office, at the awards on the wall, the deals framed and mounted, all the proof of his success. None of it mattered as much as a 9-year-old kid finishing his math homework. 2 months passed. Blake threw everything into making his company matter. Real change, real impact, real purpose. But the cost was brutal. He worked himself to exhaustion, slept 3 hours a night, lost weight, stopped returning Maria's texts. Richard cornered him one day. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Destroying yourself. First it was finding Maria, now it's this crusade to save the world. Blake, you can't keep living like this." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look like death. When's the last time you ate a real meal, slept more than 4 hours, had a conversation that wasn't about work?" Blake didn't answer. "This isn't sustainable," Richard said. You're gonna burn out. And then what? Everything you built, both versions, falls apart." Blake knew Richard was right, but he didn't know how to stop. Didn't know how to be anything other than all in. His phone rang. Unknown number. Blake almost didn't answer. "Hello? Mr. Blake?" A young voice, familiar. "Marcus?" "Yeah, Ms. Maria gave me your number. I hope that's okay." Blake's heart clenched. Of course it's okay. "What's up?" Silence. Then, "Are you coming back?" The question gutted him. "I'm trying, buddy. It's just complicated right now." That's what my dad said before he left for good. Blake felt like he'd been punched. "Marcus, I'm not your dad. I'm not leaving for good." "Then when are you coming back?" Blake looked around his office, at the mountain of work on his desk. Sat the meeting scheduled for the next 3 months. Solid. "Soon," he said, but the word felt like a lie. "Okay." Marcus didn't sound convinced. "Ms. Maria says hi. Tell her I said hi back." "Mr. Blake?" "Yeah? I finished that math test you helped me study for. Got a B+. Blake's throat tightened. "That's amazing, Marcus. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks. I wish you were here so I could show you." The call ended. Blake sat there staring at his phone, at the choice he couldn't stop making. Work or people, empire or community, money or meaning. Why couldn't he have both? His office door opened. Richard again. "There's someone here to see you." "I don't have time." "Make time." Richard stepped aside. Maria walked in. Blake stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. "What are you doing here?" Maria looked around the office. You at the view, at the leather furniture, at Blake's exhausted face. "I came to see if you were okay." "Clearly you're not." "I'm fine." "You look terrible." "Thanks." Maria walked to the window, looked out at the city. "Impressive view." "Maria," she turned to face him. "You're killing yourself, Blake. Again. Different reason. Same result. I'm trying to do the right thing. By working yourself to death? By abandoning the people who need you so you can save people you've never met? That's not fair. Isn't it? Marcus called you because he misses you. Those kids at the center miss you. I miss you. But you're so busy trying to prove you're a good person that you forgot how to actually be one." The words hit like bullets. Each one true, each one painful. "What am I supposed to do?" Blake asked. I can't split myself in half." Maria stepped closer. "No, but you can ask for help. You can delegate. You can build something sustainable instead of something that requires you to sacrifice everything." "I don't know how." "Then learn. Because this She gestured at him, at his exhausted face and hollow eyes. This isn't living. This is just another prison. Different bars, same cage. Blake sat down, felt the weight of everything crushing him. Maria sat across from him. The promise you made me when we were kids, you kept it. You came back. You proved you mattered. Now it's time to stop proving and start living. How? Maria smiled. Come back to Chicago. Not forever. Just for a week. Rest. Remember who you are. Then figure out how to be both versions of yourself without dying in the process. Blake looked at her. At the woman who'd saved him twice, who was trying to save him again. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll come back. Maria reached across the desk and took his hand. The red ribbon on her wrist touched the one on his. Good. Because we need you. The real you. Not the exhausted ghost version. Blake held her hand and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Blake took the week off. First time in 15 years he'd done that. Richard almost had a heart attack, but Blake didn't care. He flew back to Chicago on a Tuesday morning. No security, no driver, just him and a carry-on bag. Maria picked him up from the airport in a beat-up Honda that made strange noises when it turned. Blake loved it. Welcome back, she said. Good to be back. They drove through the city, past the old neighborhoods, past the fence where everything started. Blake stared out the window, watching memories play like movies in his mind. When they got to the center, kids were already there. Marcus saw Blake first. The kid ran at him full speed and crashed into a hug that nearly knocked Blake over. You came back. Blake held him tight. I promised, didn't I? Adults break promises all the time. Not this one. Not anymore. The other kids crowded around, asking questions, showing him things they'd made, telling him stories about what he'd missed. Blake felt something in his chest loosen, something that had been tight for months finally relaxing. He spent the day like he used to, helping with homework, playing basketball, fixing things that broke, being present in a way he'd forgotten how to be. That night, after everyone left, Blake and Maria sat on the steps outside. Same spot. Different conversation. You look better, Maria said. I feel better. It's amazing what sleep and actual food does. Maria laughed. Revolutionary concept. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when two people really know each other. I figured something out, Blake said. What's that? I've been thinking about this all wrong. The company. The center. You. Me. I kept trying to choose between them. But that's not the answer. So what is? Blake turned to look at her. Integration. Not separation. I don't have to abandon my company to help here. I can use the company to help here. Fund programs, create jobs, build systems that actually work for communities like this. Maria smiled. That's good, Blake. Really good. And I don't have to be here every day to matter. I can show up when I can, be present when I'm present, build something sustainable with people I trust. He paused. Like you. Maria raised an eyebrow. Like me? What if you ran the programs? What if I funded them, you led them, and we built something together that actually lasts? Blake, I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's partnership. You know these communities. You know what they need. I have resources. We combine them. Create something real. Maria studied his face. You're serious? Completely. I'm tired of choosing between two versions of myself. I want to be one person. Whole. Not split. And what about us? The question hung in the air. Blake had thought about it constantly. The promise he made. The girl he found. The woman she became. I don't know, Blake said honestly, but I'd like to find out. No pressure. No expectations. Just two people getting to know each other without the weight of childhood promises. Maria touched the ribbon on her wrist. I'd like that too. Blake felt his heart race. Yeah? Yeah. But Blake, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to complete you. I'm not going to fix what's broken. You have to do that yourself. I know. And I'm not waiting around forever. If you disappear again, if you choose the Empire over showing up, that's it. I'm done. I won't. Promise? Blake smiled. I promise. And this time I know what promises cost. I'm ready to pay it. Maria leaned her head on his shoulder. Blake put his arm around her. They sat there watching the sunset over the neighborhood where it all began. Two kids who grew up, who got lost, who found their way back. Not to each other, not yet, but to themselves, and that was enough. 6 months later, Blake stood in front of the newly renovated community center. Fresh paint, new equipment, expanded programs, all funded by his company. All run by Maria and her team. Marcus stood next to him, holding a pair of oversized scissors. They were about to cut the ribbon for the grand reopening. You ready? Blake asked. Marcus nodded. You think my mom will be proud? I know she will. She's watching right now. They'd helped Marcus's family avoid eviction, got his mom a job, gave them stability. It wasn't charity. It was investment in a kid who deserved a chance. The same chance Maria gave Blake 20 years ago. Maria walked over, smiling. Speech time, Blake groaned. Do I have to? You funded this whole thing. Yes, you have to. Blake stepped up to the microphone, looked out at the crowd, familiar faces, kids he'd tutored, families he'd helped, community members who'd watched this place transform. 20 years ago, Blake started. I was a starving kid sitting by a fence. I had nothing, no family, no future, no hope. Then a 9-year-old girl gave me her lunch, every day for 6 months. She didn't have to, she just did. He looked at Maria. She was crying. That act of kindness saved my life. Not just because of the food, because it showed me that people can choose to care. That goodness exists. That small actions matter. Blake's voice cracked. I spent 20 years trying to repay that debt, trying to keep a promise I made as a kid, but I was wrong. You can't repay kindness. You can only pass it forward. He gestured to the center. This place isn't about me. It's about all of us, about choosing to see each other, about feeding someone who's hungry, about showing up, about keeping promises not because you have to, but because you want to. Marcus tugged his sleeve. Mr. Blake, can we cut the ribbon now? Everyone laughed. Blake handed Marcus the scissors. Together they cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered. Kids ran inside to see the new space. Parents followed. The community poured in. Maria walked up to Blake. That was beautiful. I meant every word. She took his hand. I know you did. Blake looked at their intertwined fingers, at the matching ribbons on their wrists, faded, but still there. So, Blake said, what happens now? Maria smiled. Now we live, we work, we show up, we see what happens. No more promises? No more impossible ones, just real ones. The kind we can actually keep. Blake pulled her close. I can do that. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. Blake kissed her forehead. Not romantic, not yet, just present, real, human. They stood there watching the community celebrate, watching kids laugh, watching families connect, watching small acts of kindness multiply into something bigger. Blake had spent 20 years chasing a promise, building an empire, searching for meaning, and he found it here, not in money, not in success, not even in Maria, in choosing to see people, in showing up, in being the person someone needed when they had nothing. The starving boy by the fence was gone. But the man he became? That man finally understood what the promise actually meant. Not, I'll make you my wife, but I'll never forget that kindness matters. And that was a promise worth keeping. Listen, if you made it this far, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now, subscribe to this channel. Because this story, it's more than entertainment. It's a reminder that the smallest acts of kindness can change everything, that promises matter, that showing up matters, that you matter. Drop a comment and tell me about a time someone showed you kindness when you needed it most. Or tell me about a time you were that person for someone else. Maybe you're going through something right now and you need to hear that it gets better. Maybe you're the Maria in someone's story and you don't even know it yet. Whatever it is, share it. Let's build a community of people who believe in showing up, who believe in keeping promises, who believe that goodness still exists in this world. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because we're all just trying to figure this thing out. We're all just hungry kids looking for someone to see us. Be that person. Show up. Keep your promises. Not the impossible ones, just the real ones. That's what matters.